All right, guys, I'm hoping this will be a quick recap on some concepts that you're familiar with. This chapter will go over nature versus nurture and human diversity. So let's start with nature. A few quick terms. Your body has 46 chromosomes, which are composed of a coiled chain of molecule DNA. Genes are small segments of the giant DNA molecules. So, to measure how nature and nurture affect an individual's development, psychologists like to look at twin and adoptive studies. You'll watch a video this week that'll cover twin studies, so I'm going to move on to discussing adoptive studies. Adoptive studies are really cool because we get to look at two groups, biological relatives and genetic relatives. This allows us to ask whether adopted children are more like their bio family or their adoptive family. One of the most interesting findings of these studies is that apart from identical twins, whether we're related to the people we grow up with or not, we don't really resemble one another in personality. Adoptive children tend to have personalities that are more similar to their biological parents. Therefore, our personalities tend to be shaped more by our heredity than our environment. So why is it that children in the same family are so different? Why doesn't our shared family environment have a huge effect on children's personalities? We don't definitively know the answer to this question. Genes do seem to limit the environmental influence on personality, but the environment can still have some influence. For example, one study showed that when siblings are raised separately, so one is raised with an adoptive mother and another the biological mother, the adopted mothers used gentler parenting, gave more guidance, and experienced less depression. Therefore, it isn't surprising that most adoptive children thrive. One aspect of our personality is our temperament. This is our emotional reactivity and intensity, which we're born with and is genetically influenced. So our temperament is relatively stable across our lifespans. Emotionally intense children tend to become fairly intense young adults. Heritability refers to the extent to which variation among individuals in a group can be attributed to their differing genes. Our personality traits are about 40% heritable. Major depressive disorder is about 30% heritable. Intelligence is about 50 to 80% heritable. Heritability refers to how much differences among people are due to genes. It doesn't mean that X% of your personality, intelligence, etc. came from your genetics. Okay, so while we've covered a little bit of information on nurture or how our environment affects us, let's look at it a bit more in depth. So when it comes to our brain development, our brain is heavily influenced by our environment. When we're born, we can understand every language in the world. As we start to hear our native language and get used to the unique sounds present in our language, our brain starts to go through a process called synaptic pruning. This is where neural pathways that are used less and less gradually disappear. Although we can still learn a new language, we may not be able to hear all the nuanced sounds used in that language. This same process also explains why kids seem to have an easier time learning things like language and instruments than adults do. The genes our parents pass on to us can influence us, but so can the environment they put us in. We often see these influences when they're at the extreme. So we see that abused children can grow up to become abusers, but we also see that those who grow up in a home where they're deeply loved can grow up to become self-confident and socially competent. In general, children's personalities are not easily influenced by parental nurture. However, peer influence tends to affect children more than their parents do. For example, I remember hating zucchini as a kid, but whenever I went to my best friend's house and her parents served zucchini, I ate my share and then I asked for seconds because my best friend loved zucchini. Peer influence shows up in other ways. Teens who start smoking usually have friends that smoke. Kids are also more likely to talk like their peers and less like their parents. Culture can play a huge role in our development. So culture is the behaviors, ideas, attitudes, values, and traditions shared by a group of people and transmitted from one generation to the next. Cultures have their own sets of norms, which are rules for accepted and expected behaviors. For example, in the States, we have a norm that you wait in line. But a professor of mine told me about how when he conducted some research in China, one of the most shocking differences there is that people didn't wait in lines. It may seem odd to us, but that would be a cultural norm for people in that region. Cultures are dynamic and they change over time. For example, since individuals in the US experience greater economic independence, women today are more likely to marry for love. Okay, I want you guys to do a quick activity. I want you to pause this video and think about how you would describe yourself to someone. If you can, write down a few of the words or phrases that you come up with. Once you're done, resume the video. Okay, how did you describe yourself? Did you say statements such as, I'm a good student, I'm attractive, I'm a good soccer player, or something along those lines? If so, you are probably from an individualistic culture. Individualistic cultures give priority to one's own goals over group goals. They define their identity in terms of personal attributes rather than group identification. Individualistic cultures still feel the need to belong, so they connect with others, but they're less focused on things like group harmony and helping out the group. Individualists feel free to change jobs, leave relationships, or move away from their immediate family. If you responded with statements such as, I'm a good son, I'm a tribe member, or I'm trustworthy, then you may be from a collectivistic culture. Collectivists have a deep attachment to their groups. They value group harmony and will often put the group above themselves. They maintain connections, try to fit in, and have very close and endearing relationships. In general, individualism is on the rise, even within collectivistic cultures. Our culture also affects the way we raise children. So Western cultures prefer teaching children independence from a young age. Western cultures are beginning to value things like obedience, respect, and sensitivity less and less. Instead, individualism is something that is valued. Parents in Asian and African cultures place more value on emotional closeness and encourage a strong sense of family self, meaning that what shames the child shames the family.